On June 11, 2016, during the Bundeswehr's open day at Hohn Air Base in Germany, a Transall C-160 cargo aircraft executed a maneuver that was risky enough under normal circumstances, let alone during wartime, and it was all caught on camera. The Sarajevo approach, otherwise known as combat landing, is a precise maneuver that requires a deep dive into the airstrip and then a bounce back at the last possible moment, all to avoid enemy fire. During the war in Bosnia, relief cargo aircraft from all over Europe were sent to Sarajevo in humanitarian missions, but on September 3, 1992, an Italian aircraft was down, despite its peaceful intentions. A German Transall C-160 was coming right behind, and the German crew now found themselves with a fully loaded aircraft and had to find a way to land safely. It was almost an impossible situation, forcing them to be more agile than all the warring parties surrounding the ravaged airport. Post-war needs. In 1957, West German and French companies agreed to develop and produce a new aircraft together, and Transall was formed 2 years later. The Transporter Alliance Consortium was made up of Nord Aviation, Weser Flugzeugbau, and Hamburger Flugzeugbau. The specifications called for a new tactical aircraft able to carry 16 tons of cargo over a range of 1,720 kilometers, or 8 tons over 4,540. Plus, the aircraft had to operate on semi-prepared airstrips. Though a 4-engine configuration was considered, it was passed over in favor of a cheaper twin-engine arrangement, which was lighter and used less fuel. The simplified layout provided a more reliable aircraft and featured two 6,100 horsepower Rolls-Royce Tyne turboprops driving 4-bladed propellers. The transport was operated by a crew of 3, 2 pilots and a flight engineer. Furthermore, it had the capacity to carry 93 troops, up to 88 paratroops, or 62 stretchers. Typical loads ranged from wheeled or tracked vehicles, light or medium towed artillery pieces, and standard pallets. The C-160 could operate directly from frontline positions and had the significant advantage of being able to take off on airstrips as short as 700 meters or land with nearly 400 meters available. As late as 2016, the Transall was still in use with the German military, and during the open day at Hohn Air Base on June 11th, it executed one of its iconic maneuvers. Footage taken at the event shows the post-war aircraft diving deep into the ground and pitching up just mere inches before touching it. It was a maneuver the C-160 had already performed over 2 decades before, in the midst of one of the most gruesome recent wars. (1992) 8 minutes before landing, the air traffic controllers at Sarajevo suddenly lost radio contact with an incoming Italian transport aircraft. The voices in the headphones fell silent exactly at 1 p.m. on September 3, 1992. Yugoslavia had recently broken apart, and the emerging Bosnia and Herzegovina strived for independence from the rest of the former republics. Still, several ethnically rooted archaic disputes arose among the multi-ethnic populations of Bosniaks, or Bosnian Muslims, Serbs, and Croats. After the new nation's Declaration of Independence was recognized in the spring of 1992, hell broke loose in the capital. Bosnian Serb paramilitary troops opened fire on Sarajevo and then engaged in heavy artillery bombardment. Entire populations were displaced or even ethnically cleansed, resulting in a grim humanitarian crisis that soon drew international attention. By September, military crews from 19 nations had delivered 12,000 tons of supplies to the ravaged capital in no less than 1,000 missions on behalf of the United Nations. But that day, the relief efforts would take an unexpected turn. The Italians had been attacked and hit by a missile, putting into question the operational conditions in Bosnia. The Sarajevo approach. A second 8 aircraft was crossing over to the war zone right after the Italians. It was a Transall cargo transporter from the Bundeswehr, crewed by 5 men and loaded with 15 tons of supplies. Transall routinely flew 2 missions a day every 4 days from Zagreb in Croatia. The crew had been assured that none of the warring parties had surface-to-air missiles. Thus, the C-160 flew without passive protection, unconcerned with the possibility of rockets. However, they soon realized what happened to the Italian transport aircraft and had to make a decision quickly. While most maneuvers didn't pose a significant risk for four-engine cargo carriers, such as the American Hercules, with its higher top speed and longer range, the so-called combat approach could be fatal for the twin-engine Transall. If one engine failed on the approach to Sarajevo, the other one would not be enough to lift the loaded transport to safe heights. There was no choice. The crew had to land in the war-stricken area. 1.5 hours into the flight, and while at 2,500 meters, the pilots idled the engines and extended the flaps and air brakes. They then began a steep descent onto the runway while taking sharp turns to avoid being hit by the ground forces. To make matters worse, the airport landing aids were destroyed, and every approach had to be controlled visually. Sarajevo did not have a ground-controlled approach or GCA radar to guide the crew. Simple cloud formations then became a significant threat to the crew's safety, forcing the pilots to avoid those between their aircraft and the line of sight to the runway. Only then could the aircraft curve out of the narrow corridor designated as an approach lane. What happened next would come to be known as the Sarajevo approach. How it works. The Sarajevo approach is usually required when there's an enemy presence in a landing zone. Journalist Eric Malzarski wrote, quote, "You can prepare grunts for the rigors of combat, yes, but you can't prepare them to be sloshed around in an aircraft that's packed like a can of sardines as it descends downward in a near-vertical corkscrew that stops on a dime." The pilots first have to perform a corkscrew cruise to lower altitude. Before coming to an airfield, cargo aircraft have an average altitude of 18,000 feet, and thus, the transport has to arrive 7 to 10 minutes before the scheduled landing. When the aircraft is in line with the landing strip, the aircraft drops sharply at about 60 degrees. As seen in the 1992 footage, the pilots then dive towards the ground, and at the last possible moment, they pull up, just in time to hit the runway. The moment the wheels touch, the pilots open the slats or spoilers and put the gear into full reverse to come to a complete stop, having used as little runway as possible. In 1992, the Bundeswehr transporter managed to perform the strenuous maneuver under critical circumstances, 50 minutes later than planned. However, it came out unscathed. The following week, 14 attacks were reported on 8 aircraft. Aftermath. To minimize risks and continue relief operations in the war-torn city, the Transall was equipped with radar warning devices and missile safeguards. In addition, the model was provided with more advanced navigation and flight instruments, autopilot, Kevlar armor, chaff dispensers, and electronic warfare self-protection systems. All Luftwaffe transporters would receive such upgrades eventually. Furthermore, crews would receive thorough training to learn how to shoot flares to deflect heat-seeking missiles away from the hot engines just at the right moment. Other evasive maneuvers would also be taught, like the so-called yo-yo flight, dropping down and quickly lifting up repeatedly to evade missiles. The C-160 proved to be a versatile aircraft, serving in specialist roles, from electronic intelligence and communications platforms to aerial refueling. Decades later, the aircraft kept serving with generations of pilots who continued practicing a dangerous maneuver that could save their lives one day. Thank you for watching our video. Please subscribe to all our Dark Documentaries channels for more epic stories from around the world, and let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Stay tuned for more.